A sleek black limousine purred at the entrance of the Laurent estate, its polished exterior reflecting the golden glow of the Manhattan skyline. Inside the grand ballroom, laughter and the clinking of crystal glasses filled the air as New York's elite gathered to celebrate Celeste Laurent's birthday. The evening shimmered with extravagance, a perfect display of high society, until the unthinkable happened. As the towering doors swung open, a hush swept through the crowd. Silas Laurent, a billionaire whose name carried weight in financial circles and political backrooms alike, stepped into the room, not with his wife on his arm, but with a strikingly young woman draped in a scarlet gown. Conversations died mid-sentence, champagne flutes lowered. Whispers rippled through the ballroom as curious gazes darted toward Celeste, who remained oblivious to the storm brewing just feet away. Silas had never shied away from scandal. A self-made mogul, he thrived on risk, conquering industries with his relentless ambition. His name was synonymous with power, a staple in the upper echelons of New York's elite. He had mingled with world leaders, financed groundbreaking tech ventures, and donated millions to charitable causes. On the surface, his marriage to Celeste was an enviable union, the perfect blend of wealth, intelligence, and prestige. Celeste, an art historian with degrees from Cambridge and the Sorbonne, had come from old money herself. Her father, Victor Moreau, had funded the expansion of some of Europe's most renowned art museums. Their wedding had been the event of the decade, gracing magazine covers, their love story admired by many. Over the years, Celeste stood by Silas's side at high-stakes business negotiations, proving herself a sharp, strategic mind. To the outside world, they were the ultimate power couple, unshakable. But success had a price. Silas's ambition consumed him, his focus shifting from their marriage to expanding Laurent Enterprises, a conglomerate spanning real estate, tech, and global investments. Late nights at the office became routine. Business trips turned into weeks-long absences. Celeste, ever patient, watched as her husband became more of a stranger. She had hoped that tonight, her birthday, would rekindle something between them, especially with the secret she had yet to share. The secret growing within her. Yet here he was, flaunting his latest conquest without an ounce of shame. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Some guests exchanged knowing glances, others watched Celeste with quiet sympathy. Even in the opulence of the evening, the betrayal cut through like a cold blade. Silas had shaped his world with an iron grip, controlling every narrative about his life. But tonight, he had set the stage for a reckoning. And Celeste, standing in the center of it all, realized that the decision she made next would change everything. Silas Laurent's late nights at the office became more frequent. Business trips stretched longer. Celeste had long suspected that her husband's devotion to Laurent Enterprises had begun to overshadow their marriage, but she had never imagined the extent of his distraction. Still, she remained supportive, especially after discovering she was pregnant. This child, she believed, could be the fresh start they needed. Her birthday party would be the perfect opportunity to tell him. Surrounded by family, friends, and the city's elite, she hoped to see a glimpse of the man she had married, the man who once cherished her. As the night approached, the Laurent estate buzzed with preparation. The grand ballroom gleamed under chandeliers polished to a mirror-like sheen. Velvet-draped tables were adorned with arrangements of white orchids and golden candles, filling the air with the soft scent of honeysuckle. The catering staff meticulously prepared a lavish 12-course meal, each dish flown in from world-renowned chefs. Her father, Victor Moreau, ensured the guest list was flawless: dignitaries, fashion moguls, and New York's most powerful figures. Meanwhile, across town, Silas sat in the dim glow of a Michelin-starred restaurant, his gaze fixed on the woman across from him. Sophia Devereaux, a striking young marketing consultant, had entered his world barely a year ago. Smart, ambitious, and intoxicatingly unpredictable, she had quickly become more than just a business associate. She made him feel invincible, fueling the thrill he had been missing. As Sophia swirled the wine in her glass, she smiled knowingly. "You're distracted," she mused. Silas smirked. "Just thinking. About tonight?" She leaned in, her voice like silk. "Why don't you take me with you?" It was reckless, a direct insult to Celeste. But as Silas considered the idea, arrogance took hold. He had spent years shaping his own narrative, bending the world to his will. Why should this night be any different? Back at the estate, Celeste stood before her mirror, smoothing the soft fabric of her gown over the growing curve of her stomach. Soon she would share her secret. Soon she would watch Silas's face light up with joy. But the stage was set for something far darker. As the evening began, guests arrived in sleek town cars, stepping into a world of elegance and excess. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their melodies weaving through the chatter of Manhattan's elite. Celeste welcomed each guest with warmth, her practiced grace hiding the nervous flutter in her chest. Then a hush swept through the ballroom. The air grew thick with tension as heads turned toward the entrance. Silas had arrived. But it wasn't his presence that stole the breath from the room. It was the woman on his arm. Sophia. A vision in red, she moved with effortless confidence, her lips curving into a knowing smirk. Guests exchanged glances, whispers spreading like wildfire. And then Celeste saw him, her husband, standing at the threshold, completely unbothered by the storm he had just unleashed. Her fingers tightened around her champagne flute, her breath catching in her throat. This was her night. Their night. And yet, Silas had turned it into something else entirely. The power couple the world admired had just become the center of a scandal. Celeste stood in the glow of the ballroom, her silk gown flowing effortlessly over the curve of her growing belly. Tonight was supposed to be perfect. The evening had been meticulously planned, from the opulent floral arrangements to the 12-course meal curated by world-renowned chefs. Her father, Victor Moreau, had spared no expense, ensuring every guest was someone of importance: real estate tycoons, tech moguls, and even the mayor himself. It was a night for celebration, a night where she would share her most precious secret. The moment was set. After her father's toast, she would stand before the room and announce the life growing within her. She had envisioned it 100 times, Silas's stunned expression melting into joy, the applause of their friends, the warmth of a shared future. But fate had other plans. A shift in the air swept through the ballroom. The once lively chatter quieted, and an unspoken tension spread like wildfire. Heads turned toward the grand entrance, where a hush had settled over the crowd. Silas had arrived, impeccably dressed in a tailored tuxedo. His presence alone commanded attention. Yet it wasn't him that left the room breathless. It was the woman at his side. Sophia Devereaux. She moved beside him with effortless confidence, her crimson gown clinging to every curve, the sequins catching the chandelier's light like fire. Her lips curled into a knowing smirk, as if she relished the chaos she had just ignited. Celeste's fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne flute, her pulse hammering in her ears. She felt the world tilt beneath her, the carefully constructed reality she had clung to unraveling in an instant. This wasn't a mistake. Silas hadn't simply brought a guest. He had paraded his mistress through their home, on her birthday. A slow murmur rippled through the room, whispers of disbelief and scandal passing between guests. Some exchanged wary glances, others openly gawked. Even those well acquainted with the billionaire affair rumors were stunned by the audacity of it. Across the room, Silas met Celeste's gaze. For a fleeting moment, something unreadable flickered in his eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a confident grin as he guided Sophia deeper into the ballroom, as if nothing was amiss. Victor Moreau was at Celeste's side in an instant, his voice low and urgent. "What is the meaning of this?" Celeste barely heard him. Her pulse roared in her ears, a mix of rage, humiliation, and heartbreak tightening in her chest. This was supposed to be her night, and yet Silas had just made it the beginning of her reckoning. A few guests turned away in quiet disapproval, their loyalty to Celeste evident in the way they refused to acknowledge the unwelcome arrival. Others, ever the opportunists, swarmed Silas and Sophia like moths to a flame, eager for gossip and scandal. Then, as if the air itself had grown heavier, the crowd hushed. Silas approached Celeste, stopping just inches from her. He carried himself with the same effortless confidence that had once made him magnetic, yet now it only felt like a dagger to her chest. Behind him, Sophia hovered, her presence like a dark omen. "Happy birthday, darling," Silas said smoothly, leaning in to brush a chaste kiss against Celeste's cheek. The contact was empty, a mere formality. His voice was devoid of warmth, and yet the room still held its breath as if waiting for the inevitable explosion. Celeste's emotions churned: rage, betrayal, heartbreak. But she had spent a lifetime mastering composure. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she met his gaze with icy resolve. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice even but tight. Silas stepped aside, and Sophia took his place. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Celeste," she said, her tone laced with false sweetness. "I've heard so much about you." Celeste forced herself to hold her ground. She would not let Sophia see her falter. "Likewise," she replied, her single-word answer dripping with tension. The guests standing closest could feel the charge in the air. A few exchanged nervous glances, while others leaned in, sensing the quiet war unfolding. Victor Moreau, ever the dignified host, stepped forward, seizing the moment before the tension could boil over. He took the microphone, his voice steady as he prepared to deliver the evening's formal toasts. The atmosphere shifted slightly, the focus now forced away from the scandal unfolding at the center of the room. Still, beneath the polished veneer of elegant conversation, a storm brewed. Dinner began in a golden glow of candlelight, servers moving with practiced grace as they presented each lavish course. The sound of fine crystal clinking filled the air, and conversation ebbed and flowed. Yet no one at the head table was truly at ease. Celeste sat between her father and Silas, the presence of Sophia just a seat away, like a physical weight pressing down on her. The arrangement had been made before anyone knew the identity of Silas's guest, before anyone realized he would dare to turn his wife's birthday into a billionaire scandal. Tension thickened with every passing minute. Celeste kept her posture straight, her fingers brushing absently against her abdomen. Her baby moved within her, a soft flutter, a silent reminder of what truly mattered. She would endure this night, she had to, but she would not forget. The clinking of glasses filled the grand ballroom, but Celeste barely heard it. Guests raised their flutes in her honor, offering polite smiles and murmured well wishes. Yet, beneath the shimmering chandeliers and polished marble floors, her thoughts raced. Why had Silas done this? Why, on this night of all nights, had he chosen to humiliate her so openly? Midway through dinner, Victor Moreau stood, tapping his glass with a silver spoon. The hum of conversation quieted as every eye turned toward him. A father's pride shone in his expression as he gazed at Celeste. "I have watched my daughter grow from a curious, determined child into a remarkable woman," he began, his voice rich with emotion. "Her passion, her loyalty, and her kindness have brought immeasurable light to our family. And tonight, I want to raise a toast to Celeste, who never ceases to amaze me." Applause rippled through the room, but Celeste's hands trembled in her lap. This was supposed to be the moment. She had planned to share her news, to turn this evening into a celebration not just of her birthday, but of the life growing within her. But now, with Sophia sitting so brazenly close, watching her with sharp, knowing eyes, doubt crept in. Could she still do this? Victor turned to her with an encouraging nod. The room waited. Summoning every ounce of strength, Celeste rose to her feet. One hand instinctively rested over her stomach, the other gripping her champagne flute. Her breath was unsteady, but her voice was clear. "Thank you, Father, and thank you all for being here tonight. She hesitated for only a second before forcing herself forward. "I have a little surprise to share with you." Silas's expression was unreadable. Across from him, Sophia's lips curled slightly, as if she were watching the next act of a carefully staged performance. Celeste straightened her shoulders. "I'm expecting a baby," she announced, her voice unwavering. "Silas and I are going to have our first child." A collective gasp rippled through the room before applause erupted. Guests, oblivious to the simmering tension beneath the surface, rose to offer their congratulations. Victor pulled her into an embrace, tears glistening in his eyes. Silas, however, leaned in, brushing a quick kiss against her cheek. "You might have told me sooner," he murmured, his tone cool, detached. The words sent a chill through her. She had hoped for joy, maybe even surprise. Instead, all she saw was mild annoyance. And as she pulled away, her gaze flickered towards Sophia. The woman's expression was unreadable. No jealousy, no shock. Just a quiet, unsettling calm. Celeste's stomach twisted. Tonight, the billionaire love triangle at the heart of Manhattan's elite had taken center stage, and she wasn't sure how the next act would play out. The once festive atmosphere had dulled, and Celeste felt it in every glance, every hushed whisper. She tried to remain engaged in conversation, but her attention kept drifting to the other side of the room. Silas leaned in toward Sophia, his lips dangerously close to her ear, as she let out a quiet, knowing laugh. The sight was a slow, deliberate cut, a reminder that she had become a spectator in her own life. The humiliation threatened to consume her, but beneath the sting, something else stirred, a quiet, unexpected resolve. This was her child, and she would not allow Silas's reckless choices to define their future. She pressed a protective hand against her growing belly, as if grounding herself in the only certainty she had left. As dinner ended, guests moved into the lounge, sipping espresso and indulging in after-dinner liqueurs. A jazz ensemble played softly, their melodies weaving through the corridors. Some of the more influential attendees made discreet exits, while others lingered, perhaps anticipating another layer of scandal to unfold. Celeste stood near the grand fireplace, its warmth doing little to thaw the cold tension in the room. She attempted to distract herself with small talk alongside Isabella Quinn, the renowned fashion designer and one of the few people who truly understood what she was going through. "How are you holding up?" Isabella asked softly, her gaze flickering toward Silas across the room. Celeste swallowed hard. "I don't know," she admitted. "I feel humiliated, but also strangely free." Isabella arched a brow. "He's really crossed a line. You deserve better." Before Celeste could respond, Silas approached, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Darling," he said smoothly, placing a brief hand on her shoulder as if they were nothing more than business acquaintances. "I'm stepping outside for a moment. Kenton Cross wants to discuss a venture." Celeste eyed him warily. "Are you sure it's just business?" Silas's expression hardened. "Don't start, Celeste. Not now." Without another word, he turned on his heel and disappeared into the crowd, leaving her standing there, her question unanswered. The dismissal burned. On her birthday, in front of their guests, in front of the press, he had effortlessly pushed aside her feelings like they were nothing. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Sophia slip through a side door leading toward the garden terrace. Something inside her snapped. Curiosity and indignation ignited within her, pushing her forward. Without a word to Isabella, she navigated through the throng of guests and stepped into the crisp night air. Tonight, she would no longer stand quietly in the shadows of this billionaire marriage drama. The garden was bathed in soft, golden light from the carefully placed flood lamps, casting long shadows over the perfectly manicured hedges. Statues of Greek deities stood motionless among the greenery, their marble expressions unreadable, as if bearing silent witness to the chaos unfolding inside. Celeste spotted Sophia near a stone bench, scrolling through her phone, a smug grin playing at her lips. "So," Celeste began, her voice steady despite the fire burning inside her, "you decided to attend my birthday party on the arm of my husband. Bold choice." Sophia glanced up, unconcerned. There was no flicker of guilt, no hint of hesitation. Instead, she tilted her head, offering a small, pitying smile. "Silas insisted I come," she said lightly. "He said it was important for us to be seen together." The casual cruelty of her words made Celeste's stomach churn. She clenched her fists, willing herself to remain composed. "Tell me," she said, her voice quieter but laced with steel. "Does it bother you at all that he's married? That I'm carrying his child?" Sophia smoothed a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry if this hurts you, but Silas and we have something real." Celeste felt her pulse pounding in her ears. "He made it clear your relationship was falling apart," Sophia continued. "I never thought you'd be pregnant." How long had Silas been feeding her these lies? Had he rewritten history so smoothly that even he believed it? The fury in Celeste's chest tightened like a fist. "Did he tell you why things changed between us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Did he mention that I stopped trusting him because he was never home? That every time I reached for him, he was already looking elsewhere?" Sophia's expression hardened slightly. "He's different with me." Celeste let out a hollow laugh. "Of course he is. He was different with me once, too." She took a slow, deliberate step forward. "I'm not here to fight with you, Sophia, but let me give you a piece of advice." Celeste's eyes locked onto hers. "A man who cheats with you will cheat on you just as easily." For the first time, something flickered across Sophia's face. Doubt, perhaps, or irritation. Before she could reply, the sharp sound of approaching footsteps shattered the tension. Celeste turned to see her father, Victor, stepping into the garden, concern etched across his features. "Celeste," he said carefully, scanning her face. "Are you all right?" Straightening her posture, she forced a composed smile. "I'm fine, father." Victor's gaze flickered between Celeste and Sophia, quickly piecing together the confrontation. Though he kept his tone neutral, there was an undeniable coldness in his eyes as he regarded Sophia. The billionaire cheating scandal had just reached its breaking point, and Celeste knew the battle was far from over. Victor's gaze was unreadable as he turned to Sophia, his voice cool but commanding. "Miss Devereaux, if you'll excuse us, I need a moment alone with my daughter." For a brief second, Sophia hesitated, as if weighing whether to defy him. But then, with a graceful nod, she slipped past them and disappeared into the mansion. As soon as she was gone, Victor took Celeste's hands in his own. "This is unacceptable," he murmured. "I won't stand by and watch you be humiliated like this." Celeste exhaled shakily, a single tear escaping before she could stop it. "I know, father," she whispered, "but I need time to think. I have to decide what's best for me and the baby." Victor's face softened, and without hesitation he pulled her into a protective embrace. The quiet stillness of the garden wrapped around them, the distant hum of the party fading into irrelevance. "Whatever you choose," he said, "I will stand by you." As the moonlight cast a silver glow over the estate, Celeste realized she had reached a crossroads. One path led her back inside, to Silas, to their fractured marriage, to the pain that had become her reality. The other was uncertain, but it held the promise of dignity, and a future she had nearly forgotten was possible. Long after the last guests had left, the Laurent estate fell into an uneasy silence. The staff moved swiftly, clearing away the remnants of the evening. Discarded champagne flutes, wilting floral arrangements, half-eaten desserts left abandoned on porcelain plates. Celeste retreated to her bedroom, feeling as if she had aged years in just a few hours. She stepped out of her silk gown, letting it pool at her feet, and turned toward the mirror. The curve of her stomach was more noticeable now, no longer hidden beneath flowing fabric. She ran a hand over her abdomen, feeling the steady, quiet presence of the life growing within her. Is this the world I want to bring you into? A place where she was disrespected so openly, where her child's father paraded his mistress as if love and loyalty meant nothing. Down the hall, a light spilled from Silas's study, the faint aroma of whiskey drifting into the corridor. Celeste took a deep breath, forcing herself forward. She needed answers, and for the first time in months, she refused to let him dismiss her. She stepped inside to find him behind his massive mahogany desk, eyes locked on his computer screen. At the sound of her entrance, he glanced up. "Celeste," he said, his voice lacking any real warmth. She closed the door quietly behind her. "What you did tonight was humiliating," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor threatening beneath it. "On my birthday, of all days, you bring her here." Silas exhaled, rubbing his temples. The billionaire's marriage scandal had reached its breaking point. Silas exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Look, I'm sorry. It had to happen this way. But let's not pretend, Celeste. You've known for a long time that our relationship has been strained. Sophia is part of my life now." Celeste stiffened. "And I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child." For a fleeting moment, something flickered in Silas's eyes. Guilt, hesitation, but it vanished just as quickly. "I know that," he admitted. "But you've never supported me the way I needed. You constantly criticize my absences, my decisions, my business expansions." She cut him off, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Because you push me away. Every time I try to meet you halfway, you disappear. On another business trip, another late night with no explanation. Do you even hear yourself?" Silas rose from his chair, pacing behind his desk. In the dim glow of his study, the shadows under his eyes seemed deeper, the tension in his shoulders heavier. "I'm under tremendous stress, Celeste," he said, voice tight. "We're finalizing an international deal that could change everything. I have a board meeting next week that will determine the future of Laurent Enterprises. And now we have a baby on the way. Something you didn't even tell me until you announced it to the entire room tonight." Celeste's anger flared. "I planned to tell you privately," she snapped, "but you've been avoiding me for weeks. We barely share a meal together. let alone a real conversation. Silas ran a hand through his hair, his exhaustion momentarily breaking through the facade. "I can't do this right now," he muttered. Celeste studied him for a long moment. Once she might have softened, tried to understand, made excuses for him, but not anymore. "If you won't choose to be a husband and father," she said, her voice quieter but unwavering, "then I'll make a choice for myself and this child." The words struck like a distant thunderclap. Silas frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, her voice firm now, "that I'm considering leaving. I can't keep living like this. Not for me, and certainly not for our baby." Silas's face paled slightly. Was it fear or anger? She couldn't tell. He opened his mouth as if to respond, but then closed it again. The silence between them was deafening. Something inside Celeste settled. Her decision was made. She would not allow herself to be paraded around like some billionaire's forgotten wife, humiliated while he flaunted his affair in public. Without waiting for his response, she turned on her heel and walked out of the study. Her heels echoed against the polished floor, each step a resolute stride toward a future she would create on her terms. In her bedroom, she shut the door and pressed her back against it. A swirl of emotions crashed over her: sadness, anger, fear. But beneath it all, something else stirred. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of freedom. Celeste had made her choice. No more pretending. No more playing the obedient wife while her husband flaunted his betrayal in front of the world. By morning, the fallout had already begun. The sound of frantic voices and camera shutters echoed outside the estate. Word had spread like wildfire. Silas Laurent, the billionaire investor, had paraded his mistress into his pregnant wife's birthday party. The scandal was irresistible, fueling speculation across social media and news outlets alike. Celeste stood at her bedroom window, watching the chaos unfold. Dozens of reporters crowded outside the gates, cameras flashing, microphones waving in the air. Her stomach twisted, but she forced herself to remain steady. She had been raised in the public eye, but never had she felt so exposed, so vulnerable. But she refused to be the silent victim of a billionaire divorce scandal. She stepped back, taking a steady breath. Today would not break her. After slipping into a comfortable yet elegant maternity dress, she called for the household staff. "No statements are to be made without my approval," she instructed firmly. She would handle this herself. Then she picked up her phone and dialed the one person who could help her navigate what came next. "Margaret," she said, as soon as the call connected. "I need your advice. Things have gotten complicated." Margaret Pierce, one of the most formidable names in family law, responded with reassuring calm. "Tell me everything." Celeste exhaled, gripping the phone tighter. "Silas openly brought another woman into our marriage, in front of everyone. I need to protect myself and my baby." Margaret didn't miss a beat. "We'll go over your options: prenup, child custody, financial assets. The media storm will be brutal, but we can manage it." "Do you want me to come over?" "Yes," Celeste said without hesitation. "I need to figure out the best course of action sooner rather than later." By mid-morning, Margaret arrived, carefully maneuvering past the reporters. She was a sharp, impeccably dressed woman whose mere presence exuded control. Meanwhile, Silas had already left for his office, dodging the press entirely. Celeste had no doubt that he was already working on damage control, spinning a narrative that painted him as the victim of a crumbling marriage rather than the architect of its destruction. But she wouldn't let him define the story. She had lost control of her marriage, but she would not lose control of her future. And as she prepared to meet with Margaret, she vowed, Silas Laurent may have humiliated her, but he would never break her. Margaret sat across from Celeste in the sunlit parlor, her sharp eyes filled with both warmth and steely resolve. A notepad rested in her lap, her pen poised. "The first question is simple," Margaret said. "Do you intend to remain married?" Celeste hesitated, her mind flickering back to the past. Their wedding day, the quiet moments of shared laughter, the nights they had spent dreaming about the future. But those memories had long since been overshadowed by secrecy, distance, and betrayal. Finally, she exhaled and shook her head. "No. I can't see a way forward with Silas. He's made it clear where his priorities lie. I won't subject myself or my child to that kind of instability." Margaret nodded, jotting down notes. "Understood. In that case, we can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and emotional cruelty. Your prenuptial agreement entitles you to significant assets, but we need to ensure Silas doesn't manipulate his financials before proceedings begin. Celeste's hand instinctively rested over her abdomen. And custody? Margaret's expression softened. We'll file for shared custody, but if you can prove it's in the child's best interests to be primarily with you, given Silas's public behavior, that won't be difficult. They spent the next hour strategizing, reviewing documents, discussing legal approaches, and preparing for the inevitable media storm. Halfway through, Victor joined them, placing a reassuring hand on Celeste's shoulder. "You're not going through this alone," he told her firmly. Celeste felt a wave of gratitude. Despite everything, she still had a strong foundation beneath her. When Margaret finally departed, Celeste knew the hardest part was still ahead. She squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and stepped out onto the front steps of the estate. The moment she appeared, the press erupted. Cameras flashed in rapid bursts, microphones jostled forward, and frenzied voices called out her name. She raised a hand, steadying herself against the whirlwind of attention. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice wavering slightly before she steadied it. "I would prefer privacy during this difficult time. However, I understand there are questions." The noise swelled. A voice called out above the rest, "Are you divorcing Silas Laurent?" Celeste met the sea of cameras, her posture unwavering. "I'm consulting with my legal counsel regarding all available options," she said calmly. She wouldn't let this high-profile divorce battle define her. She would define it herself. "That's all I can share for now." Celeste turned away, ignoring the avalanche of follow-up questions from reporters. Camera flashes erupted around her, voices overlapping in a desperate attempt to pull more from her. But she didn't stop. Her heart pounded, but she kept her head high. This was the start of her own story, one where she would no longer be defined by Silas Laurent's shadow. Inside the estate, a staff member closed the doors behind her, shutting out the chaos. She exhaled slowly, her resolve hardening. She would stand firm, not just for herself, but for the child growing inside her. The battle had only begun, but she was ready to fight for her future. Across town, at Laurent Global's headquarters, Silas paced his corner office, his phone pressed to his ear. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a breathtaking view of Manhattan's skyline, but his focus was locked on the crisis unraveling around him. "You assured me this merger would go smoothly," he barked. "Now the board is panicking because of the media circus surrounding my personal life. I need a PR statement immediately." On the other end of the line, Bradley Swain, Laurent Global's chief communications officer, kept his voice measured despite Silas's frustration. "We have a draft statement ready," Bradley said. "However, I strongly advise a unified approach with your wife. The tabloids are relentless right now." Silas exhaled sharply, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Celeste isn't cooperating. She's consulting her own lawyers and refusing to speak to me." There was a beat of hesitation on the other end. "With all due respect, if you and Mrs. Laurent appear combative, it could hurt the company's public image even more. The board wants stability." Silas slammed his fist against the desk. "If the board is so concerned, they should remember how much Laurent Global owes to my leadership." His jaw tightened as he ended the call abruptly. The reflection staring back at him from the polished surface of his desk was not the man he prided himself on being. Silas Laurent had built an empire, controlled markets, dictated outcomes. And yet, this billionaire marriage scandal was spiraling beyond his grasp. His phone buzzed with incoming texts. Sophia, acquaintances, business partners, some seeking clarity, others, undoubtedly, looking for gossip. Before he could respond, a knock sounded at the open door. Ketten Cross stepped inside, closing the door behind him. A longtime associate in real estate, Ketten had witnessed the birthday party fiasco firsthand. "You've really stirred the pot this time, Silas," Ketten remarked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Silas exhaled, leaning back in his chair. This was no longer just a PR disaster, it was war. Kenton leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "The business community is already whispering, Silas. They're wondering if you can't handle your personal life. How can you handle billion-dollar deals?" Silas bristled. "I know how to manage my affairs. The tabloids will move on once the next scandal pops up." Kenton crossed his arms, watching him carefully. And Celeste? She looks serious about taking the baby and walking away. You stand to lose a lot if you don't handle this diplomatically. Silas's jaw tightened. You think I don't know that? I've been going over the prenup. My lawyers assure me we have options. Kenton shook his head. But is a nasty legal battle worth it? The public loves Celeste. She's philanthropic, well-spoken, practically royalty in certain circles. If she plays the sympathy card, you'll be painted as the cold-hearted husband who flaunted his mistress in front of his pregnant wife. You might win the merger, but you'll lose in the court of public opinion. And that could hurt your bottom line more than you realize. Silas exhaled sharply, pressing his fingers to his temples as the headache he'd been suppressing all morning began to take hold. So what do you suggest? Talk to her, Kenton said simply. Come to an agreement. Maybe it's time you realize that salvaging your reputation is more important than protecting your ego. Silas shot him a glare, but said nothing. Deep down, he knew Kenton was right. His entire empire was built on public trust, investor confidence, and the illusion of control. And now, that carefully constructed image was cracking. Stocks had already dipped, and whispers of investors pulling out were growing louder. When Kenton finally left, Silas slumped into his chair. His phone buzzed. Sophia. He stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Finally, he swiped to take the call. What do you need? He asked, his tone clipped. Sophia's voice was soft. I'm worried about you. The media is hounding me too. People are calling me a homewrecker, saying horrible things online. He sighed heavily. It'll blow over. Don't respond to them. A pause. Then, her voice turned hesitant. And us? Where do we stand if Celeste files for divorce? Silas's mind reeled. He saw his future unfolding, either losing massive portions of his wealth in a bitter divorce or dragging Celeste through a brutal legal fight. Neither option was appealing. I don't know, he admitted finally. Before she could respond, he ended the call. His phone landed on the desk with a dull thud. For the first time in his life, Silas Laurent felt something foreign. Powerlessness. The billionaire cheating scandal wasn't just a headline anymore. It was his reality. For the first time in years, Silas Laurent felt trapped. The life he had carefully built, his empire, his marriage, his reputation, was crumbling. His company wavered under the weight of scandal, his marriage teetered on the edge of collapse, and Sophia was already demanding reassurances. Yet even as uncertainty gnawed at him, his pride remained unshaken. He hadn't clawed his way to the top just to be undone by headlines and gossip. I can handle this, he told himself. I always do. But the storm only grew. Over the next week, the media frenzy reached a fever pitch. Tabloids splashed his face across magazine covers with brutal headlines like Laurent's double life and billionaire's mistress crashes pregnant wife's birthday. Morning talk shows dissected every available detail, with experts analyzing his body language from grainy party footage. Social media was even worse. Hashtags like Team Celeste and Team Silas flooded every platform. But the vast majority rallied behind Celeste. Feeling cornered, his PR team released a formal statement. Mr. and Mrs. Laurent are committed to resolving their private matters amicably and appreciate the public's understanding during this personal transition. The statement did little to stop the wildfire. Rumors swirled that Celeste was preparing to file for divorce, citing adultery, an accusation that carried weight in certain conservative business circles. Investors watched the scandal unfold, and whispers of wavering confidence in Laurent Global's leadership began to spread. Celeste, however, remained silent. She refused interviews, entrusted her father, Victor Moreau, to handle any urgent press inquiries, and allowed Margaret Pierce to prepare the necessary legal documents. The Laurent estate became a fortress. Security tightened, the gates remained shut, and staff were under strict orders to turn away outsiders. But life had to continue. Celeste, who once curated art exhibitions, threw herself into a new passion, an upcoming charity gala supporting children's art programs. It was something she wanted to build in honor of her baby, a way to transform heartbreak into something meaningful. Each day brought its own struggle. Some mornings, the weight of betrayal pressed heavily on her chest. But amid the pain, something else stirred, a quiet excitement about her future as a mother. Isabella Quinn became a steady presence, visiting often to help plan the event. Together, they scouted venues, reached out to sponsors, and designed a gala that would not only raise funds but shine a spotlight on underprivileged youth in the arts. Celeste had once been known only as Silas Laurent's wife. Now, she was building something entirely her own. The billionaire divorce scandal that threatened to break her was now fueling her transformation. And for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Celeste might have lost faith in her marriage, but she still believed in something greater. She refused to let betrayal define her. If she couldn't salvage the life she once dreamed of, she would build a new one. One with meaning, one where she could still make a difference. Meanwhile, across the city, Silas fought to contain the damage. The merger he had spent months securing was slipping through his fingers. Foreign investors hesitated to associate their brand with a man drowning in scandal. Even as he doubled down on negotiations, offering sweetened terms and personal guarantees, the uncertainty lingered. At the same time, he was preparing for war on another front. His high-powered legal team wasted no time crafting an aggressive defense for the impending divorce. Their strategy was ruthless, designed to protect his wealth at any cost. They sent over a series of legal documents, filled with cold, calculated language that questioned Celeste's mental state. The implication was clear. She was unstable, her judgment compromised by pregnancy hormones. When Celeste read the papers, she felt physically ill. It wasn't just an insult. It was a direct attack on her credibility as a mother. Margaret wasted no time drafting a searing rebuttal, warning Silas's team that any further slander would be met with legal action for defamation. Still, in the quiet moments, the weight of it all threatened to crush Celeste. Some nights, she woke up with silent tears streaming down her cheeks, mourning the life she once envisioned with Silas, the life she had fought to protect. But then she would feel the flutter of movement within her, the undeniable presence of the child growing inside her. And each time, it strengthened her resolve. On the 8th day of the media firestorm, she received an unexpected phone call. Catherine Lyons flashed across her screen. Celeste hesitated before answering. The renowned talk show host had built her career championing women's rights. "Celeste," Catherine's voice was warm, steady. "I'd like to invite you for an interview. No gimmicks, just a chance for you to speak your truth." Celeste's grip tightened on the phone. A part of her wanted to remain silent, to protect her privacy, to keep control of what little she had left. But another part of her, a growing part, recognized the opportunity for what it was. This wasn't just about her. It was about setting the record straight, about her pregnancy, her future, and the truth behind this billionaire divorce battle. "I'll consider it," Celeste said, exhaling slowly. "Give me some time." She ended the call and looked around the grand foyer of the Laurent estate, her hand resting instinctively on her belly. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming her voice. "Whatever path I choose," Celeste whispered, her hand gently resting on her belly, "I promise it will lead us to a life of love and respect." And so, the battle lines were drawn. Silas might have an army of lawyers and PR strategists at his disposal, but Celeste had discovered something far greater, her own strength. Now she stood at a pivotal crossroads. Would she take control of the story, or allow the scandal to define her? After careful deliberation, she accepted Catherine Lyons' invitation. The thought of exposing her pain to the world both terrified and intrigued her. But the potential benefits were undeniable: the chance to correct the relentless rumors, to reclaim her agency, and to make it clear what kind of future she envisioned for her child. After consulting with Margaret and Victor, Celeste agreed to a carefully controlled sit-down interview in a neutral setting. On the evening of the broadcast, she arrived at the production studio, which had been transformed into an intimate living room-style set. Soft lighting framed 2 elegant armchairs facing each other, separated by a table with a modest floral arrangement and 2 glasses of water. Off-camera, a small crew whispered final adjustments, ensuring microphones and cameras operated flawlessly. Catherine greeted Celeste warmly, giving her a reassuring hug. "Remember, you're in control," she whispered. "If at any point you feel uncomfortable, just say so." Celeste nodded, inhaling deeply. Dressed in a modest yet sophisticated gown, she exuded quiet elegance. But beneath the poise, her eyes carried the weight of everything she had endured. The countdown began. As the cameras rolled, Catherine turned toward the lens. Good evening. Tonight I'm joined by Celeste Moreau-Laurent, who has found herself at the center of a billionaire marriage scandal involving her husband, Silas Laurent. Celeste, thank you for being here. Celeste offered a composed smile. Thank you for having me, Catherine. Catherine leaned in, her tone filled with genuine concern. You've remained largely silent since the reports surfaced about Silas's affair. Why choose to speak now? Celeste folded her hands in her lap, exhaling slowly. This past week has been overwhelming, she admitted. I've been hounded by paparazzi and my family's privacy has been invaded, but I've also realized something important. When you stay silent, you allow others to control your story. She met Catherine's gaze, her voice steady. I want people to understand, I am not just Silas Laurent's wife. I am my own person, and I have my own story to tell. Catherine nodded, leaning in with quiet understanding. And for the first time in weeks, Celeste felt truly heard. Catherine's voice remained steady, though the weight of the conversation was unmistakable. I understand you're expecting your first child with Silas. How has that impacted your decisions? Celeste's hand instinctively rested on her growing belly, as if drawing strength from the life inside her. Becoming a mother changed everything, she said softly. It made me realize what I'm willing to accept and what I won't. I can't raise my child in a home built on deception. Catherine nodded, her gaze filled with understanding. There are those who believe that marital problems should be handled privately. What do you say to them? Celeste's voice wavered, but she refused to look away. Normally, I would agree, but when your husband parades his mistress into your birthday party in front of hundreds of guests, it stops being private. A small, bitter laugh escaped her. It becomes public humiliation. And the media? They thrive on scandal. Staying silent only lets them tell my story for me. Catherine leaned forward slightly, her expression serious. The rumor mill suggests you're seeking a divorce. Is that true? A flicker of emotion crossed Celeste's face before she steadied herself. Yes, she said firmly. I am filing for divorce. I have to protect myself and my child. Silas's affair, it wasn't the only problem, but it was the final straw. A heavy silence filled the studio. The weight of her words settled like a quiet storm. Catherine glanced at her notes, then carefully chose her next question. Alexander's legal team has made statements questioning your emotional stability due to your pregnancy. How do you respond to that? Celeste's eyes flashed with anger. I'm not surprised, she said, her voice sharper now. It's a common tactic. Discredit the woman, especially if she's pregnant. But let's be clear. I'm under a doctor's care. I'm healthy. And if anything, pregnancy has given me more clarity. I know exactly what I want for my future. Catherine leaned back, a soft smile breaking through the tension. And what do you envision for that future? For yourself and your child? For the first time in the interview, Celeste's expression softened. I want a life filled with love, where my child grows up knowing respect and kindness, she said. I plan to continue my philanthropic work, especially with children's art programs, and more than anything, I want my child to be proud of the person I become. The interview concluded on a reflective note, with Catherine commending Celeste's courage. Thank you for your honesty tonight, she said. Your story will resonate with so many who have faced similar betrayals. As the cameras powered down, Celeste exhaled deeply, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. For the first time since the billionaire divorce scandal began, she had spoken her truth, on her terms. Catherine stood, embracing her gently. You took back your story tonight, she whispered. Celeste smiled. Yes, she had, and she wasn't done yet. You were incredible, Catherine whispered as she hugged Celeste one last time. Stay strong. When Celeste stepped out of the studio, the crisp night air met her, but it was nothing compared to the warmth of the man waiting for her. Victor Moreau took her arm gently, his eyes shining with pride. Proud of you, my girl, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Celeste managed a small, tired smile. This is just the beginning, isn't it? Victor nodded, leading her toward the waiting car. Yes, but at least now, you're the one writing your own story. As the vehicle glided through the city, Celeste gazed at the skyline, its glittering lights a reflection of the chaos still unfolding. Somewhere in the labyrinth of glass and steel, Silas was watching, processing every word she had said. He was likely already plotting his next move. But she no longer cared. For the first time, she wasn't a silent figure in the background of his life. She had stepped forward, taken control, and there was no turning back. Across town, Silas sat in the dim glow of his penthouse, his jaw tight as he replayed the interview. Celeste had done it. She had confirmed the divorce, exposed his affair, and worst of all, made him look like the villain. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Business partners, board members, friends. And then, Sophia. He exhaled sharply and finally answered. "Did you watch it?" His voice was strained, his body tense. "I did," Sophia admitted. "It's not good for you, Silas." Her hesitation made his frustration spike. "Just say it," Sophia sighed. "Public sympathy is with Celeste. Everyone's calling her a brave mother-to-be, and you're—" She trailed off, reluctant to finish. Silas's grip tightened on the phone. "I'm what, Sophia?" She hesitated again, but finally said it. "You're the unfaithful billionaire. Social media is tearing you apart." A wave of heat surged through him, panic threading into his veins, despite his efforts to stay composed. "The board won't turn on me," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I control the majority shares." Sophia's silence made his stomach sink. "Yes," she said carefully, "but if confidence in you drops enough, they will find a way. You've made enemies, Silas. You ignored their warnings, pushed through decisions they advised against. This scandal is giving them the perfect excuse." His mind reeled, flashes of tense boardroom meetings surfacing, moments where he had dismissed concerns, silenced dissent. Now those same people had the upper hand. "So what?" he bit out. "You're saying I should apologize? Play the devoted husband?" Sophia's voice was hesitant. "Maybe, or turn the narrative against Celeste. If you don't fight back, you'll lose everything." Silas closed his eyes, inhaling sharply. For the first time in his life, he felt something foreign. Fear. The billionaire cheating scandal wasn't just an inconvenience anymore, it was a threat. The idea twisted in Silas Laurent's gut. His pride rebelled against the thought of apologizing, but the alternative, allowing Celeste to control the public narrative, was worse. "I'll speak with my PR team," he said curtly, ending the call before Sophia could say another word. Within an hour, his corner office was filled with crisis managers. Laptops glowed on the long glass table, phones buzzed with incoming updates, and tension clung to the air. Bradley Swain, his chief communications officer, cleared his throat. "The interview has completely shifted public perception," Bradley said. "Celeste is being hailed as a role model, someone standing up against infidelity. Sympathy is overwhelmingly on her side." Silas's fingers tapped against the polished desk. "Then we need to take control of the story." A younger strategist chimed in. "We could issue a counter-statement, suggest that Mrs. Laurent intentionally withheld the pregnancy from you, frame it as emotional leverage. That might sway public opinion." Silas clenched his jaw. He knew Celeste had tried to tell him. He had ignored her, brushed her aside, too focused on business and his own distractions. "That's thin," he muttered, though desperation flickered in his eyes. "But we can't just let her run away with this." Bradley hesitated before speaking again. "Silas, maybe you should consider a genuine apology." Silas shot him a cold look. "Public contrition could do wonders," Bradley pressed. "A show of remorse, a vow to support Celeste and the child financially, no matter what. It could restore some goodwill." His pride warred with the rational part of his mind. Apologizing meant admitting fault. And in Silas's eyes, Celeste wasn't blameless in the collapse of their marriage. But an all-out battle would only escalate the damage to his company, his reputation, his legacy. Finally, he exhaled. "Draft a statement," he said, his voice tight. "Frame it as regret for how things unfolded. Reaffirm my commitment to the child. Mention that I hope Celeste and I can reach amicable terms." Relief was evident on Bradley's face. "We'll have it ready by morning." As the team filed out, Silas remained seated, his gaze drifting toward the city skyline. Amicable terms. The phrase felt hollow. He thought of the legal documents his lawyers had sent, accusations of Celeste's emotional instability. He hadn't protested. He knew it would only enrage her further. How had it come to this? His mind wandered to memories of Celeste, her laughter, the way she used to look at him when they talked about the future. Their spontaneous weekends in Paris, the late-night conversations over candlelit dinners, the way she had once believed in him. He couldn't pinpoint when it all unraveled. Maybe it hadn't been one defining moment. Maybe it had been 1,000 small betrayals, each one chipping away at what they had built. And now, the billionaire marriage scandal he had once dismissed as temporary gossip had turned into something he could no longer control. Now they stood at opposite ends of a public battlefield, neither willing to yield. Silas exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, a small voice inside him whispered that maybe Celeste wasn't the only one hurting. He pictured her during the interview, sad, determined, and undeniably pregnant with his child. For a fleeting second, guilt gnawed at him. But then, anger surged back. She had ambushed him, turned public sympathy into a weapon, leaving him cornered. Whatever remorse he had felt was crushed beneath the weight of his pride. If Celeste wanted war, he would fight with every tool at his disposal. Days bled into another week. Celeste's interview aired globally, igniting heated debates. Donations to her charity skyrocketed, while Silas's once pristine reputation suffered blow after blow. Stockholders at Laurent Global murmured their concerns in closed meetings. Rumors swirled that the board was quietly exploring contingencies, preparing to remove him if his public image compromised the company's stability. Yet, within the walls of her estate, Celeste focused on something greater than scandal. She poured herself into her charity event, finding solace in journaling, painting, and quiet moments of reflection. She even began designing a nursery, choosing soft pastel hues and hand-painting whimsical animal murals, determined to create a peaceful world for her child. Silas, however, refused to retreat. His legal team escalated their counterattack, filing motions that painted Celeste as manipulative, accusing her of deliberately withholding news of her pregnancy to control him. He declined direct interviews, but released a carefully crafted video statement. In it, he appeared remorseful, yet subtly shifted blame, citing marital discord, and Celeste's supposed lack of understanding for the pressures of his business empire. Reactions were mixed. Some saw sincerity, others saw damage control. Late one afternoon, raised voices echoed through the estate. Celeste stepped into the hallway to find Victor locked in a heated argument with a man in a tailored suit, one of Silas's lawyers. Margaret stood nearby, her expression tight with anger. "They've come to serve you additional papers," Margaret explained, frustration lacing her tone. "They're pushing for an urgent hearing on spousal support and property claims." Celeste stiffened. "Is Silas here?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Laurent is not present. He simply sent me to deliver these documents." She accepted the thick envelope, scanning the legal jargon. The accusations were clear. Silas was challenging her right to portions of the estate, claiming she had abandoned the marriage. The billionaire divorce battle had just reached a new level. The accusations cut deep. Silas wasn't just challenging her right to the estate, he was accusing her of public defamation, claiming the interview had damaged his reputation. Celeste's blood ran cold as she scanned the legal document. "That's enough," Victor snapped, his voice sharp with barely contained fury. He turned to the lawyer. "You can leave now. Any further communication goes through Miss Pierce." The man hesitated, then gave a stiff nod before turning on his heel. As the door shut, Celeste exhaled shakily, her heart pounding like a drum against her ribs. "He's not letting up," she murmured. Margaret placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We anticipated this. We'll fight it." That night, Celeste locked herself in her bedroom, the city skyline stretching beyond her window. Tears pricked her eyes, finally breaking through the composure she had fought so hard to maintain. The weight of the child in her womb felt both comforting and terrifying. This baby depended on her to build a life filled with love, stability, and security. But how could she do that with Silas's relentless legal attacks threatening everything? She wiped her eyes, inhaling deeply. Then, she reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered for a moment before dialing a number she hadn't called in years. A familiar voice answered. "Aunt Rosalind," Celeste whispered, her voice unsteady. "I need a place to stay. Somewhere quiet, where I can think. Is your guest cottage still available?" The warmth in her aunt's response was immediate. "Of course, my dear. Come as soon as you wish." Relief surged through her. If Silas wanted war, fine. But she wouldn't sit here as an easy target. She would remove herself from this toxic battlefield, cross an ocean if she had to, and focus on the only thing that mattered now, her child's future. The Laurent estate in England was secluded. nestled deep in the lush countryside. It was the perfect retreat, a place to regain her strength and prepare for the final battles ahead. The rest of the evening passed in quiet determination. She made arrangements, instructing Margaret to handle any urgent legal matters, coordinating with Victor to oversee the estate, and packing only what she truly needed. A strange calm settled over her. For the first time, she wasn't reacting to Silas's betrayals. She was taking charge of her own future. At midnight, Celeste stood at the doorway of the nursery she had just begun to decorate, her heart squeezed with bittersweet emotion. "We'll come back," she whispered, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. "But for now, we need a safe haven." She switched off the light, closing the door gently behind her. A new chapter awaited, one that would test her resilience, her capacity to heal, and her willingness to protect everything that mattered. The billionaire divorce scandal had taken so much from her, but it would not take this. What truly mattered now was the future. No matter what tactics Silas used, Celeste was certain of one thing. Neither she nor her child would ever live in the shadows of his ego and deception again. Her departure from New York was swift and silent. To avoid the press, a private car took her through a discreet airport entrance, where she boarded a small jet bound for England. As the aircraft hummed softly, lifting above the dazzling city lights, she watched the skyline fade into the distance until it was nothing more than a memory. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe. In the quiet solitude of the cabin, she flipped through old photographs, images of a life that now felt like someone else's dream. Their wedding day, two beaming faces full of hope. Honeymoon snapshots in Santorini, laughter bathed in golden sunsets. Philanthropic galas where they stood arm in arm, picture perfect for the cameras. Once, they had built something beautiful. Where did it all go wrong? The question still lingered, but it no longer carried the same sting. She was moving forward, and some answers no longer mattered. By dawn, her plane touched down on a fog-veiled runway in England. Aunt Rosalind was waiting, regal as ever, streaks of silver in her hair. The moment Celeste stepped onto the tarmac, her aunt pulled her into a warm embrace. "My darling girl," Rosalind murmured. "You've been through so much." Celeste swallowed the lump in her throat. "I just need time, away from all of it." Hand in hand, they climbed into a vintage Bentley, the countryside stretching before them, in rolling hills dotted with stone cottages and grazing sheep. Eventually, they arrived at Rosalind's sprawling estate, a world away from the gleaming opulence of the Laurent mansion. Celeste was given a guest cottage tucked behind willow trees, its ivy-covered walls adorned with flower boxes overflowing with lavender. In its quiet beauty, she found something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The days unfolded gently, morning walks through dew-kissed fields, quiet afternoons sipping tea, evenings spent reading by the fire. The relentless paparazzi and the whirlwind of social media felt a million miles away. She checked in with Margaret, learning that Silas's legal team was furious over her disappearance. But legally, there was nothing they could do. She was free. Victor reported that the media had begun to lose interest, frustrated by the lack of fresh drama at the Laurent estate. One drizzly afternoon, as she lounged by a window, she felt it. A firm, tiny kick inside her belly. A slow smile spread across her lips. The billionaire marriage scandal that had nearly broken her no longer mattered. What mattered was this: her child, her future, and the life she was about to build on her terms. Celeste placed a gentle hand over the small but undeniable swell of her belly. "You're going to be strong," she whispered. "Stronger than I ever was." A quiet realization settled over her. She had changed. Only weeks ago she had been the devoted wife, endlessly trying to hold together a marriage that had already shattered. She had sacrificed pieces of herself, pretending everything was fine while Silas lived a double life. But now, something stronger had taken root inside her. It wasn't just the life growing within her. It was her own resilience, solidifying with each passing day. Occasionally, her mind drifted back to Silas. Did he regret what he had done? Did he miss her? Or was he merely strategizing his next business move, calculating damage control like one of his corporate takeovers? The questions no longer twisted her heart in knots. The pain had dulled into a distant ache, a scar rather than an open wound. She might have loved him once, but she loved her child more. Fiercely, protectively, completely. And that love was all that mattered now. At her aunt's countryside estate, Celeste found sanctuary, not just for her body, but for her spirit. Each day her belly grew, and with it her resolve strengthened. Like the ancient stones of the manor walls, she became unshakable. She would finalize the divorce on her terms. She would secure her child's future. She would continue her work, pouring her heart into her philanthropic passions. If Silas wanted to remain trapped in his endless cycle of ambition and scandal, that was his choice. One evening, as she sat by the pond, the sky above painted in soft lilac and gold, she exhaled. The reflections of the willow trees danced across the rippling water, a reminder that nothing in life was permanent. She couldn't change the past, but she could shape what came next. As twilight fell, she returned to the cottage, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She was ready for whatever final confrontation awaited her and Silas. But for now, she embraced the quiet peace of the English countryside, every breath affirming her newfound independence and the life growing inside her, both delicate and immensely strong. Beyond these peaceful hills, the world still watched. Would Silas Laurent repent, retaliate, or relinquish the empire he had built? And more importantly, did she even care? The billionaire betrayal that had once defined her had become something else entirely. A story of strength, a story of rebirth. And Celeste was no longer the woman waiting to be saved. She was the one writing her own ending. Celeste thought the battle was over, but Silas Laurent was never the type to surrender easily. 2 weeks after Celeste arrived in England, a letter was delivered to Rosalind's estate. Not an email from a lawyer, not a cold court notice, a handwritten letter. The strong, familiar handwriting made her chest tighten. She hesitated before opening it. "Celeste, you can leave, but you can't change the fact that we have a child together. I need to see you. No lawyers, no press, just us. Silas." She gripped the letter, a storm of emotions stirring inside her. The last time they had spoken, he had been trying to manipulate the situation, grasping at control. But now, something felt different. Should she meet him? Rosalind noticed the hesitation in her eyes. "You don't owe him anything, Celeste," she said gently. "I know," Celeste sighed, "but maybe this is the last time." She chose a quiet cafe in the English countryside, away from the world that had once consumed them. Silas was already there when she arrived. He looked the same, impeccably dressed, the image of power, but there was something weary in his eyes, something almost defeated. Celeste sat across from him, her posture calm but firm. "What do you want, Silas?" He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "I lost." The words caught her off guard. "I thought I could control everything," he admitted, voice low. "But I couldn't. You proved that." His gaze flickered to her growing belly. "I've lost you, Celeste, but I don't want to lose my child." Her arms crossed instinctively. "Are you worried about losing us or losing your reputation?" Silas exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Maybe both. But most of all, I don't want my child growing up without knowing me." Celeste didn't respond right away. For the first time, there was no legal maneuvering, no carefully crafted PR spin, just a man coming to terms with the consequences of his actions. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "Shared custody," he said. "I won't take the child from you, but I want to be a part of their life." Celeste stayed silent. No threats, no conditions, just a simple request. "I'll think about it," she said. Silas nodded, accepting her answer. A month later, Celeste signed the divorce papers. She had won, not through revenge, not through destruction, but by reclaiming her own freedom. Silas kept his word. He didn't fight her, didn't try to control the outcome. They reached a civil agreement, one that allowed their child to have both parents without being trapped in their war. As Celeste put the final signature on the paperwork, she looked out the window at the sky. No fear, no pain, just peace. She had walked away from Silas Laurent, and this time, there was no turning back.